So, welcome to Beauty of Colors podcast, Eva. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
You're very welcome. So, Eva, tell us a little bit about you and what started you on your writing journey.
Well, I've always been a creative person, and I didn't start as a writer. I started in music, but songwriting got me into writing as storytelling, basically. Even my songs that I write, they all tell stories. And then about 10 or 11 years ago, I had a personal story that it changed a lot of things for me that gave me something that I needed to process, something difficult. And writing turned out to be a really good way of processing grief and trauma and those issues. But I have always been funny, always used humor and loved humor, loved to laugh and love my favorite movies are comedies.
Mm.
Um, so even in writing about difficult things, I had that to draw on that undercurrent of laughter. Um, and I imagine you want me to get into specifics as soon as.
If you do want to, when did you start writing? Like, when did you write your first journal or your first novel or your first blog or whatever it is? When did you start writing it? Like, exactly what year was it that you said, okay, I am going to start writing?
Well, I think as a child, I love to write poetry, and somewhere there's books of terrible, terrible poetry I wrote as a child. Um, but I think a lot of writers, they say they've always written, they've always wanted to be a writer, and I've always liked writing, but I never thought of myself as a writer, and but I sort of fell into it through music and through my other activities as I felt that I had stories to tell. Um, I wrote songs, I guess, starting about 25 years ago, and I hadn't written. I hadn't tried to publish anything or anything like that, but then as I mentioned before, in about 2012,
Mhm.
I learned that I have a genetic mutation that gave me a 87% chance of breast cancer and a 55% chance of ovarian cancer. And and it was inherited from my mother who had the same mutation. And at the time, she was dying of that same cancer that because of the genetic mutation. So I had some very difficult decisions to make at that point. I did not have cancer at that point. I only knew that I had this high risk. So I decided to have a preventive double mastectomy and hysterectomy, and that was all done in the space of 3 months. Um, and also during the time when I was trying to help care for my mother, who was um, fading from cancer herself. And that was a lot to bite off to deal with. And I had been, performing my songs on stage. I had this sort of cabaret act, and I was, you know, the, that I had this persona of being a, you know, sexy cabaret singer. I'd play the piano and flirt with the audience, and all of a sudden my body image was just out the window. That I felt like I was a different person, and I didn't know what I would be able to do. Would I be able to write? I thought I would never write again. I'd never write another song. I'd never get on a stage again. Um, But I wrote a song just for me and not for performing, just to talk about my own feelings about, losing my former self. And um and I hadn't really done that before, write something that I didn't intend to perform. It was just, my own expression of my emotions. But it led to other things. I played it for my husband, and that was the point when he started to really understand what I was going through. So I saw that it was a way, music was a way for me to connect on emotionally with another person about something deeply personal rather than just silly stuff.
Okay.
Um,
Wow. Mhm.
and and so I wrote another song that was more humorous. It was called Ta 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 Ta's. If you could
Mhm.
write a funny song about having a double mastectomy, that was it. And then a friend um, who's sort of a mentor to me encouraged me to write a one-woman show. And I thought, oh, I'm not going to do that. I don't, I've been this sexy person with the little, sequin cocktail dresses, flirting with audiences. I'm not going to go out there and be mastectomy girl.
Mhm.
Um, but then I started writing, and it just sort of poured out. This one woman show. It's called The Mutant Diaries, Unzipping My Jeans.
Mhm.
And I wrote the whole thing it's a musical with 9 original songs and the whole story of what I went through. Um, I've got the whole thing blocked out in probably not much more than a week.
Mhm.
And I actually got the show in shape to my very first time performing it for an audience was at in my mother's room in hospice just a few days before she died. So, and I could
Mhm.
tell that, she could understand what I was saying, and that, you know, she was responding, even though she couldn't speak at that point. And that was when I knew I needed to go out and do more with this message of um, that there was hope after trauma, and not just hope, but growth after trauma. It didn't end things in my life like I thought it would, but it began things. This feeling of expanded horizons, and also a feeling of that, life was finite and precious, and I needed to focus on things that were important, and that I had time to. I was given a second chance. I felt like, here, I've gone through this thing. I've been born again, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and I was going to go out and tell the world this story. And so I did. I performed the show. I performed it all across the U.S., and I've been done it in London twice.
Mhm.
It's streaming on Amazon, and I went on from there. Because of that, about a year after I had my surgeries, Angelina Jolie came out publicly with the same. She has the same genetic mutation that I do, and she also chose to have a preventive double mastectomy.
Mhm.
And people were just losing their minds. They were saying the most ignorant, cruel things about how could Angelina Jolie, you know cut off her breasts. If she had a risk of brain cancer, would she cut off her head? I mean, as if your breasts are as important as your head. It was just crazy. So I was contacted by somebody at the Huffington Post, and that's when I started more of my writing I started blogging for Huffington Post. Um, I had a column called Ask the Mutant, and
Mhm.
I talked about a lot of these issues there. And I started my own blog, and uh, and then um, and then I wrote a play called First You Jump that was 5 stories. It wasn't specifically about, it wasn't autobiographical in any way, but it was about 5 people who were facing situations in their lives where they had to make a difficult, life-changing decision, not knowing with no way to know in advance if it was the right choice or not.
Wow, that is that
And
is that is great.
you know, we face those decisions all the time. Every time you make one choice, you know, you don't know how your life would have turned out if you'd made the other choice. So we all have those paths that are, you know, those doors that are closed to us. And how do we deal with that? And how do you jump when you don't know if you're going to crash on the rocks below, or if there's going to be a net to catch you, or if you're going to grow wings? Um, so, that play came out in 2015,
Mhm.
and it got very nice reviews, and it sparked a lot of really interesting discussions. And one of the stories was called Geppetto's Funeral, and it was about Pinocchio at midlife, looking back and regretting the decision to become human rather than stay a puppet. He thought, well, maybe I would have been, you know, my his life hadn't turned out so great, and he said, well, maybe things would have been better if I'd never made that choice. Um,
Wow.
and
So you wrote that song,
yeah,
Tokyo, or was it a
I
play?
wrote that. It was a play. It was a short a
Okay.
play about.
So
It was a short
how
play.
okay. So how many books have you written, and what is the genre of your books?
I've written one novel. It
Mm-hmm.
came out last year. It's a historical fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
and it it also came out of this experience because it's called Pinocchio's Guide to the End of the World,
Okay, nice.
and it's about Pinocchio's. I kept thinking about him after I wrote Geppetto's Funeral. I kept thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Pinocchio and I have a lot in common. He had this big body change, and although his was desired, you know, he asked to become human. How
Mm-hmm.
did that work out for him? Did he feel, was it happily ever after, or did he feel like he was different on the inside? He was still that puppet on the inside, and now he had this human body. And how did he reconcile these two different parts of himself? And did he feel like imposter syndrome? Did he feel like, you know, he's out there parading around like a human, but deep inside he knows he's this other person? And I felt that way too, because um, I had, you know, such so many body changes, and I felt like I was in some ways a different person, but inside I was still the old person. And how did I reconcile these changes?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of led me to write the novel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's not, I mean, it's an adventure novel. It's he's a young man in Europe in the years between the world wars and the rise of fascism, and he has adventures. He goes to sea and he joins a circus, and there's, you know, all kinds of crazy things that happen in the course of this book, which is available on Amazon
Okay.
and other retailers.
Okay.
um but this thing that drives him is this feeling that he's not the same as everyone else, that he's the only one like him, and he wants a feeling of connection, but he doesn't know who he can connect to, because who else is like him? Who else began
What's
life
changed? Yeah.
one way, you know, as a wooden boy, and then became a human?
Yeah.
um so, you know, over the course of the book, he has to figure out how to be his authentic self.
So you did put some of your life experiences and what you've been through, you did kind of include that in the book as well.
Yeah, I
Okay,
did.
excellent. Okay. So where can the listeners get in touch with you? Do you have a website? Do you have any resources in terms of breast cancer, in terms of the gene that you do have? Do you have any resources to share with the listeners on your website?
Yeah, I do. I have my website is evamoon.net, and there's a link there to my show, The Mutant Diaries, which you can stream that on Amazon. Um, there's also information about other organizations that provide support for people with genetic breast cancer or genetic cancers in general. Um, and whether, I mean, I always encourage people to reach out um, to whatever trauma they're facing or situation they're facing in life. There are other people who have gone there too, and there's great support groups. Um, there's Facebook. There's a lot of groups for women who are going through things like this. And there's a great website for women with genetic cancer called Force or facingourrisk.org. Um, and aside from that, my book is available on all the major book-selling sites. It's also in libraries and bookstores on request. Um, and I hope that if you any of your listeners like if you have a family history of breast or ovarian cancer, or you're more curious about that, or just have questions, there's a contact form on my website, and I'm very happy to talk to anyone about this, and all my columns about it are still available on Huffington Post, and
Wow.
also in my own blog on my website.
Mhm. So do you have any last words for the listeners about not giving up on their dreams?
Not giving up on your dreams. Yes, the the thing is that you don't know where your life is going to go. You don't know what's path it's going to take. You could have a specific dream, and there could be obstacles in your way. Um, but there's always something that you can do when you feel at an impasse, at a sometimes a detour into a direction that you never expected turns out to be the biggest gift of all. And that was the case for me. My life was on one trajectory, and this just, there was a roadblock there, and I had to shift around it. But I found another trajectory for my life that still drew on the uh, work that I had done in the past and moved it in a direction that I never could have expected in a million years. And it's been so rewarding. Um, I have this uh, group on Facebook called the 100 Days Project, and this is a great tool for people who are struggling with pursuing their dreams, because even if nothing big like breast cancer gets in the way, it could just be, too much laundry gets in the way. And the 100 Days Project is whatever your dream is, whatever your project is, you commit to doing something every day for 100 days. And the best thing to do, I call it the MVA, the minimum viable action. It could be something that you could do in less than 2 minutes. I'm going to open up the file of my novel and write one sentence. And if you've done that, if you just do one thing, one tiny thing, every day,
Mhm.
then your project stays alive. Your
Yeah.
dream stays alive. It stays moving forward. It doesn't get stuck. Because what I find, this procrastination thing, when I was working on my novel,
Mhm.
um, I wouldn't open it one day. I'd feel kind of stuck. And then it would be 2 days. And then it would be a week. And then, and the more time it was, the harder it was to pick it up again because it felt like this monumental, I felt like like a closet door hiding, that's full to the top. And if I opened the door, it would all just come tumbling out and bury me. But I decided, okay, if I just open the file
Mhm.
and write one sentence, then I can just stop it. And then that'll be enough for the day. And I could do that. And of course, I never did just the one sentence because once you write one sentence, then you think about another sentence you want to write. Or if it's another kind of a project, um, if you're trying to declutter your home and it just feels overwhelming, you say, okay, today I'm just going to get rid of one thing,
Mhm.
or I'm going to learn one word of Italian, or
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
um, because the tiniest thing is still more than nothing.
Yeah.
And sometimes just starting, just opening one envelope in your inbox, is all it takes to get yourself going again.
Yeah, well said, Eva. That was great. I love that information that you have given to the listeners, and thank you for being on Beauty of Colors podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.